Good afternoon, gentlemen. Can't say welcome to the Mass Construction Show because it's not the Mass Construction Show. We don't have a name for this podcast yet. We're hoping to talk about this after the fact, but this is going to be a podcast by 4 safety professionals. Why we're doing this, people that are listening, is, I was doing the Mass Construction Show. I've done a fair amount of episodes on safety, but I just felt like there was so much more to do, and I'm not an expert in it. I do a fair amount of fire safety, but there was enough topics that I felt were important to the industry that I don't have the expertise in. I reached out to Jason a while back. We chatted about doing a podcast. Part of those conversations was that, maybe we should get some more voices mixed in here. So everybody's here today for that reason. So the hope is to hear 4 different perspectives. So over the next, hopefully, years, you're going to hear from Doug, Shaun, Bob, and Jason about safety, how to be better at what we all do in the construction business. And the hope is just to set the groundwork here and let everybody that's listening understand where everybody is coming from and what their perspectives are. And I think a good way to start is to ask kind of each of you, and we'll start with Bob, why are you doing this podcast?
On October 2nd of 1992, I got tapped on the shoulder, and someone saw something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. And they asked if I wanted to be the safety director for the company. At that time, I had no idea what that meant. Literally zero idea what that meant. And over years, I've been fortunate enough to have people share information with me. And I think at this point in my career, I'd like to give back in hopes of making the young practitioners' experience that much easier, and perhaps even connecting with the boots on the ground, the workers in the field, just to kind of get some insights into, why I act and am interested in what they're doing.
Great. And if we harken back, that was probably a time where, and I'm sure probably everybody in the room was not a fan of what used to be called the safety officer, right? Like you were a cop on site that walked around. That's what it was when I started.
Absolutely. Yeah, quite a bit.
Jason?
I'm not going back to 1992. I was 8, by the way, I think, in 92, when you were being tapped on the...
Lies, all lies.
All right, it wasn't 8.
More money.
I just graduated high school, fairly. I'm doing this podcast because you asked me to. All right, you want to win that?
Yeah, so you have a purpose.
I thought about it. The story for the listeners is that you had asked me this, and you kind of plugged away for a couple of months in asking, and I think I politely declined the first couple of times, and you wore me down over time.
Again, lies, but yes, go ahead.
Well, you did. You did.
Yeah.
One of the things that interests me about the idea of doing a podcast is getting the trades involved, listening to the trades, which I swear I don't feel like we do enough of in this industry. And I'm not just talking about safety. I'm just talking about in general terms that we don't listen to the trades enough. And it would be nice to get the perspective of, among other people, the trades, and start to allow the listeners to realize what the tradespeople have to go through on a daily basis, whether it's safety or any other topic. That's the reason that I'm doing this. It'd be nice that if the trades had a voice for this topic.
Excellent. Doug?
And the money, the pay. Sorry. Doing it for the pay.
I hope they're paying you better than me.
You guys get paid for this, right?
Joe? You guys can keep all the sponsorship money.
I think for me, starting in the industry back in 2000, we probably all started on a very similar journey. You want to make sure that everyone goes home the same way they came, if not better, at the end of each workday. And it's been a long, arduous journey, I'll say, for 23 years, where I think we've made some incremental improvement in the industry. And you fight for everything you can take, and it's progressed from the safety officer mentality being punitive and going out there and policing it. So for me, I think the opportunity to get the 4 of us together, and bring on guests and or talk about relevant topics that may help the industry move quicker, move safer, is what I mean. Safer, quicker, I guess, is important to me because the longer it takes us to get the information out there and talk about certain topics that may help people go home every day, we're doing ourselves an injustice in the industry. So I think that's why I'm doing it, is to have a louder voice across a bigger platform, hopefully, to be able to do that.
Shaun?
Well, for me, why I'm doing this is construction is cool. Construction is really, really cool. And, I'm fortunate to sit at this table with all of you here today. I've learned so much from you guys over my 20 years in doing this, and so many other people, that I meet out on our job sites, other safety people, tradespeople. Everybody's got a unique story, a unique background. We're all coming together to build these beautiful buildings and, create different skylines and, roads and bridges and whatnot. And it's really cool stuff. And I think that there's, a lot of opportunity for other people to share and hearing of these stories of these people that are doing this work, and hopefully learn and grow together. I agree with, what Doug said. We're at a point now that we've made some incremental changes in the industry for the better of the people that are in it, but there's a long way to go. And we're now faced with an opportunity to come together to help make, better tomorrow for so many people. And we can't do that individually. So here are 4 competing companies coming together to say, let's talk safety, let's talk construction, let's find a better way to make all of our lives a little bit easier, safer, in a really cool industry.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that has been impressive to me is safety professionals, at least in this marketplace, what I've seen AGC and then just over the years from building inspector and all different positions I've sat in. Safety is the one place where nobody's worried about, I want to keep how we do a thing at XYZ company from somebody else, right? I'm also really excited because it's going to open people's eyes to what U.S. safety professionals do. And, sometimes we forget that we have our little roles, whether we're out on a job site, we don't really know what the PMs are doing in the office, or managing safety and the field people don't know where it's from. I had somebody reach out who was a structural engineer that listens to the Mass Construction Show, and he said, hey, I just want to thank you for putting all this stuff out there. He goes, I always just did my drawings, put my stamp on an affidavit and handed it in. He goes, I had no idea what went into even getting a permit. And he's like, it's been really eye-opening to hear what happens after I do those drawings. So I'm really hoping that people can hear from you 4 and be like, okay, wow, I have a whole different perspective from this person that I might feel is hounding me or maybe is helping me, but I don't really know where they're coming from. So I'm really excited about that. Hopefully it opens people's eyes and helps them be better, not just at safety, but better at the job because they understand more sides of this business. So that's pretty exciting.
And the trick's going to be to make it interesting.
I think it will. I mean, anytime you're learning, to me, that's interesting. I mean, and yeah, if we can do it and if it's funny and that stuff, that's all a bonus. But I think if you 4 are bringing topics just like that structural engineer that had no idea about the permitting process or what a PM does, if you're bringing that information, it's going to be, just more that someone can learn. I think if it's in education, then I think it'll be interesting. That's kind of my thought.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the goal, right?
That's the goal. Yeah. I kind of feel like this will sound cheesy, but I kind of learned this over time. I kind of felt like mass construction as a business is about educating people. And whether it's social media content, a podcast, code consulting, or physical classes at a place, I didn't realize it going in, but it just kind of showed itself as, no, it's about educating people. And I think this is just one more way we can educate people. And my hope is even on the other show, we're bringing in real estate folks. And that's giving us a look into, okay, hey, here's these people we work for, but how are they thinking about it? And I think we just keep on adding in these perspectives. And I know for one, I'm going to be interested. And I feel like if I'm interested, then the listeners will be interested too. So that's exciting. The big question I wanted to ask, and I hope that this kind of informs people that listen down the road, is what are your individual philosophies on safety? Because I know everybody has different approaches just because different personalities, right? And let's just go in the same direction. Bob, what's your philosophy? And I'm going to cheat here a little bit. I loved and you can see I even highlighted it right here in blue, going from code to cares.
Yeah.
I think that's a great line, right? To what's required. Where are you supposed to have a handrail? Where are you supposed to have a toe kick? You're supposed to have your hard hat. Like, that's a very nice visual thing, right? Code, what are the rules we're supposed to follow versus, okay, those are the rules and that's fine, but, no, let's care about the person that's there. And my little one thing would be, my first job, we had a fatality. I watched somebody die. My dad was an insulator. I can say electrocuted. I know electrocuted is dead, but he was dead. Luckily, he was working in the Wing Medical Center, and they revived him. So, this is real. We can kind of minimize and say, like, oh, nothing's really going to happen. But I'm sure you guys have more stories than me. But yeah, I mean, the codes to care, I thought, was excellent.
Yeah, when I look back when I started, I had, like I said earlier, I had no idea what I was in for. So the only place I could start was really at a code level, reading standards, reading interpretations, looking up new regulations. I can remember going to Brown University, and at that time the internet was non-existent. So I had to go to Brown University and go through microfiche to look at federal registers, and I wanted to really understand the final rules. So the current practitioners have so much an advantage in that they have a computer in their hand, right? And I think as time went on, I experienced through investigations some really bad events, some life-altering events, life-ending events. And as I learned through each of those events, it really informed how I practice safety. I can remember one instance where I was working for a company that had a key indicator, and that was, we don't want any more than one citation per inspection. And I was in a quarry, and with the IMSHA inspector, we were driving out of the quarry, and in front of me I saw Andy, this gentleman, Andy Gomes, who was at the edge of a primary crusher. He was exposed to a fall. And at that point, knowing what the goals of the company were, no more than one citation per inspection, I did whatever I could do to distract the inspector. And as we passed Andy Gomes and made ourselves out of the quarry, I was thinking to myself, wow, that was close. We got up to the surface, and we made arrangements to meet the subsequent day. And after the inspector left, I got a call from the scale dispatcher, Phil Amina, and she indicated that, Bob, you've got to get down to the primary crusher. Andy Gomes just fell in. So at that point, I made a promise to myself that I would never drive by anybody. And as I think all of us here at this table probably have those moments over your career that have really informed the way you practice safety. But as we really moved forward in my career, I was very comfortable with the code, interpretations, could apply them, really begin to understand that that's not sustainable. The workers don't really want to know about the code. They want to know that you care about them. This became really apparent during COVID when, as a coincidence, I had taken a mental health first aid course that January. So during that course, I had a chance to kind of explore my own mental wellness, and also got to learn how important empathetic listening is. And we went into COVID, and the thing I told my team was, we're going to listen first without judgment, and then we're going to give them primary source information and apply that primary source information going forward. And I think over COVID, I had my own struggles with just everything that was going on, but it really helped solidify for me how important demonstrating genuine care for people is, and that when you really show care, you can connect at a level, and then you don't talk about code really. Well, it's important. I'm not trying to minimize that, but if you can just show them the right way to do it and then listen to them, and you always come up with some better plan than you envisioned. So I think more than anything, it's that journey. It's trying to create something sustainable where everyone's got a little bit of ownership in it.
Jason?
Yeah, I think we all start out kind of the same way, right? You're talking about codes and a very limited knowledge set when you get out of school or you walk onto a construction site for the first thing. You want to feel like you know everything, like you know your job, you can do a great job at it. but you don't. You don't. So the whole idea of talking about safety philosophy is definitely, if you'd asked me this question 15 years ago, it would be a completely different answer for me. But my answer now is I want to take safety off of the pedestal that it's on. And I know that sounds a little bit strange to hear a safety guy say that safety is not the most important thing in construction. It's not. I truly believe that. In fact, we had an OSHA 30 class at the AGC today, and I asked the question. I said, there are 4 buckets in construction. There's quality, cost, schedule, and safety. And I said, let's start with the easy one. Who thinks that safety is the most important out of those 4? And everybody except for 3 people raised their hand. And I said, all right, quality. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody gives a shit about quality. And then I asked about schedule, and 1 person raised their hand. And I asked cost, and 2 people raised their hand. And I said, all right, you folks that raised your hand when I asked safety, you're full of shit. You're either delusional or you're full of shit. And one guy was pretty offended. And I said, let me explain myself. I actually backed up and gave my typical disclaimer. I said, listen, I'm going to offend you, and I don't mean to do it. But here,
I can't help myself.
And I've already done it.
No, not you.
Yeah, not me. And I said that every one of us in the room today is here to make money. Every one of the businesses that we work for is in business to make money. Making money is what drives the business. It doesn't drive culture or anything like that, but it definitely drives business. So to say that safety is the most important thing on a job site, I think we're fooling ourselves. And I do believe that integrating safety into everything that we do as a business drives profitability. There's no question that it helps drive the business that employs us. So my philosophy is to take safety off of the pedestal and just integrate it in smaller ways into every little thing that we do. We've had some success where I am, from business development to marketing to pre-construction and estimating, purchasing, and then all the way through construction. We've had a lot of success in just taking little bits and pieces and integrating safety into what we do. Now, with that said, Bob, I have to echo your sentiment that the money aside, when you talk about being a safety professional, we're in a people business. The person that you're talking to out in the field, doesn't matter who they are, the owner, the plumber, the carpenter, the design, whoever, they're people. They showed up to work for the same reason that you did today, to make money and then go home at the end of the day. And I can remember so many stupid little instances from when I was younger where I said the wrong thing, acted the wrong way, like some super knowledgeable safety guy who's coming to save the day by telling you that you're doing your damn job wrong. The approach was not there. And my approach has definitely come a long way, but my philosophy is that when talking about people, they're people. That you had said it the last time we talked, Shaun, that, and I know you'll get to this in a second, but the days of looking at tradespeople as second-class citizens has to be over. It has to end.
Here.
Yeah, just too many times where your break's over there. You don't get a place to take a break, or you have to use this back entrance. And I understand some of that, but not second-class citizens. You said it best. This business is unbelievable. I love construction.
It's hard to believe that sentiment is still there. And Jason and I talked about it in the past. I remember having to go to an IIF training probably 20 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And to me, it had this, no knock against Tony Robbins, but it had a very Tony Robbins feel to it. And we're going to change it, incident injury free. There's going to be 0 accidents, all this kind of stuff. And I remember listening to it, and the whole core of it was like, they're people. And I remember being like, who doesn't think they are? And there were people that went in and felt really changed from it. But to me, it just seemed like at the core, what do you mean they're not? Like, who has that perception that, but it's still there to some degree with some people. I mean, I think it's changed quite a bit. But the fact that mentality is there at all is pretty stunning to me. I mean, do you guys feel like it's close to gone, or does it still exist out there? And maybe not from the GC side, but just even the office thing, right? Where,
there's still It's still there. It's still, I wouldn't say it's as prevalent as it was 20 years ago or back when Bob was a kid 40 years ago. That's actually probably pretty accurate, huh? Yeah.
I was in my 20s.
But it's keeping with the theme of offending people. Go on, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah. You can see the difference in, just take the client side. There are certain clients that really, really value the people that come into their sites to do work. I mean, really value it. Try to give them great facilities to work in, make them feel like they're part of the team. We'll talk to anybody that they walk by, a construction worker or, a member of their own facility. They'll talk to that person the same way. And then there are other clients that you work with where it's, we don't want you guys to be seen or heard, and you can't take a certain elevator, or there's still a little bit of that there.
I'd say we see it all the time. The elevator thing is a great example, but it's construction. From society's perspective, it appears like we want all the things that we're going to create. We don't really want to see what goes into creating them. So behind the wall, behind the fence, different elevator, different access point. Don't wear your gear through my lobby. Right, we have to do that all the time too, because there's no commingling of the construction trades and the general public. They want it separated, separate parking. Don't park in the street even though it's public street. All these different rules apply to construction workers. Society wants all the great things that we're doing, right? But they don't really want to be part of it. So I think that definitely still exists. So there's an acceptance that it'll be done, and I'll use it then. Until then, I don't really want to hear or see about it. And there are a lot of clients that feel that same way. I'll give you the keys to the building. Tell me when it's done.
Yeah. But I think the commodification of labor sometimes causes that too, where it's just looked at as a spreadsheet where those are man hours. Yeah, this is labor, that's material. And no knock on the unions, but the union setup as well contributes to that, because it's, I need 10 guys today from the hall. That's a commodity. Send me 10 anonymous people, and they get just looked at as labor on a spreadsheet. And where's my man flow curve or manpower curve? And I think that subconsciously contributes to it, where, okay, these are just, it's like a piece of equipment. How many people, field report, how many people are on site, how many pieces of equipment, this and that. It's just a commodity. And I think, how do we get everybody past that, where, no, it's not a commodity. Yes, we have to track labor and we have to track equipment and materials, but it's not a commodity. It's a human being.
But at the same time, you can provide respect and an environment of care at the job site for these folks too.
Yep.
And I think to your point, inherently, you don't have to put up a building, construct a building with safety. You don't have to have good quality. You don't have to. Those aren't things that you necessarily need to build that brick and mortar building. So for me, part of it is how do we provide an environment where we need to have safety, we need good quality. It's important to the company, it's important to the people that are on the job to provide for everyone else. It's trying to align your ideology on providing that resource of respect to all your trade partners that you're working with, to all the union members you're working with, and hopefully you get some mutual respect back in the form of, we're providing you this opportunity to work safe, please do so. And part of that, it comes down to coaching. And part of it for me, like, I'm a huge process guy. I love process. It's gonna be a buzzkill, maybe in this, because no one wants to talk process and steps. Yeah, get the snooze fest out.
That's why there's 4 people here.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? They have this a cartoon. It says like safety policies, and the book is on the table like this big, and it says how we do shit out in the field. And there's like 2 pieces of hay in that,
Yeah.
But you need some water.
You do, right? And I'm not saying process where it's so rigid that you don't have flexibility and provide autonomy. We don't want robots, because not every situation is the same.
Yeah.
But you want to provide bumper rails, I like to call it. Stay within those bumper rails, And that's where I look at, because it's important to provide consistency and predictability, I feel. And I don't feel like we offer that great in the industry. You go from one job to another. It's not predictable. It's not consistent. And I think by getting the 4 of us in a room maybe and starting to, show how everyone does it and have these conversations, maybe it becomes a little bit more predictable and consistent,
Yeah.
And I'm not one, like, we do a lot of, something happens or you go out and observe something and it's not going like you hoped it. I'm not saying you have to go back to the desk and write a policy or procedure to fix that, but there's definitely some coaching opportunities. You can have a moment with folks, coach them, provide some feedback respectfully, I think that's kind of the way I tend to look at it.
I almost wonder if, not to make more work for you guys, but if you think about it, if you come across good process material or checklist, or hey, we came across this and this is how we solved it, I think that's good content to share for people, because it's great for them to listen. But if you can also point, like, people, it's crazy, but just checklists. I give out like checklists for permitting or for 241 things, and people love it. They're like, oh, that's perfect. Some of it is just, I'm on the BFD website or whatever, and I'm going through there. I'm like, this is buried in here and it's gold. You know, I'll just grab it and I put it on LinkedIn. Like, hey, here's for large projects. Here's everything you need from BFD, and it blows up, and everybody appreciates that, right? Because we help them do their job better. So yeah, if we're thinking as time goes on, if you come across stuff like that, if you want to shoot it to me,
I think a good example of what you're speaking about is probably the COVID mitigation plans that we put together during COVID. It was a collective effort in the Boston market anyway, and we all had some variation of it, but for the most part, we are all moving forward with the same practices.
That was the best example, Bob, of what Jason was talking about, is, intertwining safety into operations, because there were, at the time, right, we remember our ops teams were meeting up together during COVID to try to look at, what does the government want? How do we get our business functioning? Because we need to make money. The safety group was getting together, and there was certainly a lot of overlap, but what do we need from a health and safety perspective, a care perspective? And the two groups came together and created that, really one document that was able to, be, customized a little bit, if you will, for each company, but generally very, very consistent. We knew we needed to get back to work. We had this crazy thing we were now dealing with, the really problematic issue, but we knew we had to get people back to work safely. That was the only way to do it, was to get them back safely. And so we came together, ops and safety, to solve for that. It was pretty good.
Yeah, and the speed with which you guys did it was impressive.
Yeah, quite a pivot, that's for sure.
Just looking at, it wasn't like normally there's one agency that you have to kind of get through, but you had to well, what did the CDC want? What did the state want? And then you had cities and towns were like, no, we want a cleaning plan. I mean, there was just this explosion of ordinances all over the place, and authorities having jurisdiction. Like, well, is it the feds or is it the state? And yeah, that was a pretty impressive undertaking to just grab that much information and say, okay, let's all put this into one thing that solves the problem. So yeah, that's a great example. And if there's something like that comes out of this, not to that level, obviously, hopefully, but yeah, that'd be a huge win. What's your philosophy, Shaun?
Philosophy. Well, when I went to school for safety, I kind of found out about it at Keene State, started studying it and realizing, how many people get hurt or killed every year. I really was really surprised. I had no idea. I went to Keene, quite honestly, to be a gym teacher. And then I didn't like that much, and I heard about safety. I said, this is kind of cool. So I kept learning about it, and I really was just surprised. And I said, nobody can figure this out. And I guess I like problems. And I think this is like safety in itself and worker health and protection, I kind of think is like one of those big puzzles to try to figure out. And, like a lot of you guys have already said, early on, it's you have to be a technical expert. So early in your career, you really need to know what you're talking about. So sometimes you can come across a little high and mighty, right? I think we probably all made that mistake. I know I have. Sometimes I still do. I hate myself for it, but it happens, right? It's because you don't want to be insecure. You want to come across. When you're younger, it's more important to be that. So you drive in compliance, and then as time goes on, you're realizing it's not just what the book says. Like Doug, you said, it's not just another policy. There's a lot of other ways to tackle this, and so that ultimate puzzle just kind of gets more complicated the further you start to tackle it, and you start to tackle it with a bunch of other people. So my feeling is, around safety is to ingest as much as you can, speak to as many people as you can about themselves, about their surroundings. How do they feel when they're showing up to work? How do they feel when they're leaving work? And definitely realize that, when people feel good, when they feel safe and secure, they're going to perform better. That's a fact. And they're going to, what's that?
And respect it.
And respect it, right. And so So quickly, you've got to have your policies because you can't have more than one citation on an inspection, right, Bob? Right. You've got to have your policies in place that are well communicated, but also in a way that people can get information back to you. And I think that's a big, big gap in our industry. It certainly is, in from what I've seen in my career. Like we can create these policies and communicate them, from our client or ourselves on down the line. But really, I always find that there's a gap coming back from those that need it the most to have the biggest voice. Sometimes they have the smallest voice. So filling that gap in is very important. So they feel heard and respected, right? That's important. And when that happens, because we've all seen it happen, we've got those terrific jobs that just everything's in harmony with one another. It's not safety's on a pedestal. It's safety's part of the process, as well as quality, as well as schedule, as well as communication. And those jobs, when they run smooth, they're awesome. They're the best jobs to visit. The morale on the job are high. The engagement is super high, and we always turn it over on time, under budget, right? Just feeling good. So, I'd like us to get there on all jobs and within all of construction. How do we do that? I'm still trying to sell for that.
Yeah, was even Jason was alluding to it, right? Where you're more profitable. Mm-hmm. By being safer, but you're saying, everything, and like we've all been on those jobs where it's clicking, and hey, shocker, everybody's getting along, everybody's making money, we're finishing it early, and everyone's going home safe. That's the holy grail, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to amend 2 of my answers, please.
I like what you said, and I like what you said. I'm going to take those
for the transcript.
I think the theme, though, was caring about people, and I think not only does it just feel better to know when, like, that just feels good, right? When you have a conversation and two people, not be cheesy, that care about each other, right? Okay, hey, we're here together and we care about each other. That feels fantastic. That's I think the most important reason to do it. And obviously the workers are safer, and that's number one. But then I also think it's like, you even look at people that talk about sales and they'll talk about Apple or whatever, and they'll say they don't talk about the specs of their computer. They don't say this has this many gigabytes of memory and this processor and blah, blah, blah. They talk about how it makes you better or how it makes you feel with that product, right?
Experience it.
It's, and I think everybody here is touching on that. With that's more effective, right? If you just go out and spit code at somebody that glares over, this guy's just irritating me, right? Yep. But if you go out and make them feel a certain way, I think that causes people to act in the way we want that's best for us and for them. So it's interesting to hear it all, that thread there. So,
Joe, if I can add to that, I mean, that's almost easy to say, right? I'm glad we all said it, right?
Minimizing how hard.
No, I know, but that's a challenge, right? Like, I think about it. I have 4 kids, right? So with my kids, there are times that, I want to be the ultimate coach and mentor and leader for them, to kind of demonstrate the right way for them to follow in my footsteps and to do the right thing and to strap their helmet, whatever, right? And try to coach them as much as I can. But there were other times I just yell at them to do it.
Yeah, because I said so, right?
Yeah, right. I think that happens to all of us in safety, right? We're on the job and you've got 15 things on your mind, if not more, just like everybody else. And you want to be that great, mentor and caring, individual. But you've got 15 other things that you got to get to. So it's easier, like your kids say, just do it. And then I'm going to walk away. And so that's the challenge. And I feel that from the trades as well. Like, nobody wants to get hurt. There's not a person in this world that wants to get hurt. But they make these decisions, right? We as humans make these decisions, which ultimately lead to our incident, right? There was a decision that created that. So how do we act better with a more caring mentality, demonstrating that to people? So hopefully when they're at a pivotal point of making that decision, they know that we want them to make the right one. That's where I'm at right now with safety, is how do we get in the minds of people to do that, and ourselves included. Every time you get in the car, do you put on a seatbelt? Do you go on the crosswalk? Do you drive the speed limit? I don't know that everybody's going to answer yes to that, right?
1 for 3.
So that's really the challenge. And I think it's more conversations like this, which is why I'm excited about this podcast, and bringing more people into that fold to share their own experiences as well, because there's an awful lot that's out there that we can learn from.
Can I ask a question? The 4 of you, I think there's probably not too much walking job sites and doing inspections anymore. I'm sure all of you do some of that, but you're all more at a senior level. How do you get, because now you're faced with the challenge of how do you get that mentality? If you can say, well, I'm out on site and I'm the safety professional on the site, like, okay, I can do that. How do you do it when you're not that person there anymore and try and get that on some job site you might never walked?
So for me, coming up through the field, you don't want to feel like you're on an island, right? Whether it's an issue, whether it's dealing with a certain company, whether it's trying to fix a certain problem. I'm sure like the group here, if you had an issue in the field and you were on a single job site or you were experiencing it, back in my younger days, you went and tried to tackle that problem and fix it the best you could. The way I look at it now is offering support to that operations group, whatever project it may be, whatever trade partner it is for that matter. They're an extension of us, essentially, if they're on our job, the way we look at it. And offering support is coaching, holding them accountable, and being there to have difficult conversations sometimes. Because it's not always like, hey, put your chin strap on, and it's done, right?
Yep.
There becomes a point where you coach once, you coach twice, you coach a third time. And then you go, yeah, what the hell, right?
Yeah.
And you can see it on certain jobs that are dialed in and have the ability to do that themselves because of a strong leadership team or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you can see it on jobs that don't. And that's where you have to be that's where I think I need to be present to help them understand what's the roadblock. Is it getting their senior leadership in and talking or getting a different crew lead maybe? Because I always say this to the group, like if you grow up and you played sports and the coach told you to run a play and you didn't run the play, he probably coached you, right? He said,
yep,
Joe, run the play. Next time down the court, you didn't run the play. What's he going to do to you?
You'll be sitting down.
He's going to bet you,
yep.
Right? So there is some like a punitive nature at some point you have to take. In football, you if you hold somebody in the offensive line, you get penalized. You hurt your team. They put you back 10 yards, and they call you out by number, right? And that's common practice. That's every day we watch football. Like, oh, that's nothing. We don't even think anything of it. But yet, when it comes to EHS, I think we're afraid to do that sometimes because we want to coach. We want to provide a safe environment to rear people or bring them up, and whatever. But at some point, they've been coached. They know what to do. Now we all got to do it. So I think it's providing that support to try to not be a robot, to try to understand to what level you've coached already, and then be that resource to bring in and have conversations to try to rectify whatever issues at hand.
Mm. Joe, it's a good point. I mean, to your point, I find myself, especially during COVID and after, that I'm more in the office than I am in the field. Mm-hmm. And I know the more remote I am from the field, this goes back to the conversation we had earlier, I find that I have to go back in the field to kind of regain that understanding of what it takes to put work in place, right? Relative to my role now is I have 5 team members that are on the younger side. We made a commitment during COVID to meet daily. So we have a huddle at 12:30 every day for half an hour. And it's a place where they can come and ask questions, for me to share something that I'm working on. And I find that I'm more vulnerable now. I allow myself to be a little more vulnerable. Like I'm going through the following, whether it's a mental wellness day that's just having a cruddy day, or whether it's a challenge I'm having with a senior leader or whatever, I share that with them and hopefully try to provide some solutions for them as well so they can apply that when they're in the field.
Seems there is a little similarity, and maybe Shaun and Jason feel the same. It sounds like taking the temperature of the teams and the jobs and saying, okay, these two over here, they need attention, and then kind of allocating your resources to the places that need it. Is that
Yes.
a reasonable way to?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some need more than others. I mean, it's a people business, right? We had a job that we just finished up for a really, really tough client. It's probably one of the hardest jobs that we've worked since I was at Lee Kennedy. Tough client, really tough working conditions. But somehow the project team, including the safety manager on the job, but mostly the superintendent and the PM, created this atmosphere of just cohesiveness. And it was those two people. And they set the tone for everybody else on the job. They insulated the entire job from that tough client, and they create that air, right? we see the same thing on the safety side. We don't have full-time safety on all of our jobs. We have it on maybe a quarter of the jobs that we have. So it's the superintendent typically who is setting that tone. So I end up working with the superintendent more than I do the safety professionals in my staff, and not so much directing them on how to manage, but just doing a little bit of coaching on how to get out in front of things and how to get, like, hey, draw a line in the sand if you have to about certain issues. But I'll tell you what, you're spot on about more time in the office and not as much in the field these days. And
it's got to be a huge challenge.
It is. If I'm being honest, I hate it.
Because how do you have a culture? Like, going back to the sports analogy, you're able to create a culture by being a coach because you're there and they see you're in it with them. When you're not in it with them, it's hard. So how do you get your assistant coaches to be able to get that same culture you're looking for? And
so it's funny, my ex-father-in-law was a firefighter. Early in my career, he said, I know you safety guys. When it's raining outside, you show up to the outside of the job site, you push your window down just a little bit, yell some orders, and take off. And I said, you don't know the reality of the real world. And this just is burned in my brain about something never to do.
Yeah.
When it's raining, you're out in the middle of it.
Perception.
It's really important. And so, I think we all still spend a fair amount of time on the jobs. The challenge is spending the time on the sites that you want to, right? Those jobs that had those cultures. Those are the ones you want to be at. They're fun, they're engaging, the trades are in high spirits, and they like when you come around. Hey, how's your day? How's this? How's that? That's very welcoming to hear from a safety guy. And I've got one right now that's active that I haven't been to in 6 months because I have zero need to go there, but I want to go there for that reason. So it's understanding where you need to be and help do that, spend that time coaching and whatever. Yeah.
So now I want to go on to kind of the second phase, and this will be for people listening. This is going to be our kind of whiteboard session. We talked about doing a whiteboard session, but I think we'll just do it live here, and I think that will be a little more interesting for people to hear what we hope this will be. I asked everybody to think about maybe who you might think might be a good guest, why that person would be a good guest, maybe a topic that you think. And my hope here is that we have a discussion and disagree and agree. You might say, oh, you know what, actually, I think that's a terrible idea. And obviously, we're not going to be rude to each other, but let's just talk honestly about...
No, we can.
Jason might be.
Yeah.
Kick them under the table.
What do we have for thoughts, for ideas or topics?
I have the mindset that I would love to sit down and listen to trades, any trade, every trade, to be honest with you. And I know that's kind of a bland answer, guys, but I picture sitting down on a job site, talking to a trade, and tell me what your day, and tell me about real safety for what you do, and let them explain the challenges that they face or some of the successes that they've had, or to share a story, whatever it is, whatever that topic is. I would love to sit down and talk to every single trade out there and just have that trade give some insight so that everybody else can hear it. That to me makes for an interesting podcast. And this is, if you guys disagree, you can pound sand.
No, I can't imagine anyone disagrees with that, right? Because then we're talking about getting down to the complete end user, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Because we're all
That's trades,
right?
It's all about the trades.
Yeah. Well, and if you want to, if we're here to talk candidly about it, you can almost pick when you asked me who would be a good guest, and I know you were leaning more towards, tradespeople. I think that's great, but there's several probably levels you can go. Like to me, the crew lead is so important. Mm-hmm. The trade partner crew lead to me is where I invest a lot of my calories, because they make or break that company they're working with. They just how they come across to their folks, the message they send. They're the blend between what we want as a general contractor and what their company wants as a company to make money. So does our ideology match their ideology? And you hope it does, because you wouldn't hire them hopefully if you didn't. But it's tough. We ask a lot, Yeah. So to me, to get the perspective of the crew lead, to get the perspective of maybe like general superintendent, what he or she thinks their responsibilities are. I think you'd almost go every level. Like you could have a guest at like every level along the way, top to bottom to top, however you want to call it. And it'd just be interesting to understand, like get a take on like, hey, how you operate your job and what you think your responsibility is, and
I agree, Doug. I mean, the crew lead's so central to the success, and they're sort of the bridge between the project management team and the worker at the sharp end of the stick, right?
Yeah. Like my carpenter and labor crew leads, they have their pulse on the job, I think, better than anyone
Agreed.
on the job site.
Yeah.
General superintendent, safety, like those two individuals know what everyone is doing every day. You'd be amazed just to spend 15 minutes with them talk, like, not that that's what you want to talk about here, but just the knowledge they have every day of all the moving parts and pieces. 400 people on site, they know what's going on.
And I think the best thing would be to hear what's the criticism from those people.
Yeah.
Right? And actually let everybody hear from the complete end user, which is, oh yeah, that idiot fucking walks around and says, do this, this, and this. He couldn't find the other end of a hammer.
Yep.
Right? Or the crew lead might come and say, yes, all the safety stuff is great, but what would make our job safest if we weren't stacked on top of each other and if we scheduled the job properly. So that's great that I have a harness and this and that, but let people hear what's the reality from all those different levels. And I would like to hear from the level under you guys.
I don't think there is one.
Good point.
It's one that work for you.
Well, Joe, to your point, like think about the responsibility. We our model is we go into Keene and we hire an individual right from Keene.
That's right. Yeah.
23 years old, and they're going to be put on a job site, and that individual has such an immense amount of responsibility on their shoulders. They probably don't realize it at the time, but they do. And your general superintendent's running the job for 20, 30 years. This person is one day on the construction site, and they're going to make sure everyone's working safely.
That's the expectation, right?
Yeah, that's the expectation, right?
Yeah.
Think about the leadership role they step right into at a young age. Even if it's somebody 2 or 3 years in changing companies, just the different philosophies from company to company, and to be 2 or 3 years in and think you know it, and you get somewhere and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's almost unreasonable.
It's 100%.
It is.
Yeah, even as
it can be.
Even as like starting off as an assistant superintendent, like I'm gonna go out and tell some tin knocker that's been doing it for 35 years, like how to do this properly.
Yeah,
like,
it's a little different though, because the assistant super has a super who's mentoring them or has a shared experience or a journey that they can inform that assistant with, or even a project engineer, right? The safety professional or the practitioner is just out of Keene a year or two, really is out on a branch by themselves because the team that they're working with doesn't have that sort of resource capacity, that understanding.
That actually does happen, but you do get a hell of an education really fast, especially when Tony, the ironworker, this is a true story, I'm not going to say his last name, threatens to throw you off the building because of the way that you talk to him. It was one of the best life lessons I've ever had. I was scared as hell, but
it's probably happened multiple times.
Well, I mean, he led into it saying, I had said something stupid. I don't even remember what I said, but I can remember him back at me and going, listen, I'm not your dog. I'm not your wife. I'm not your bitch. Don't ever talk to me like that again unless you want to be on the ground, like in 8 seconds. Message received.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
And he actually, it was a good story because at the end of the day, I mean, we're going back and forth yelling at each other, but he pulled me aside at the end of the day and said, it was one of the best mentoring things I've ever had. He said, listen, I like you, kid. But I'm a person, you're a person. Talk to me like I'm a person. You're going to get a hell of a lot more out of it. And it was like this light bulb moment for me as a safety professional.
Absolutely.
Going, I don't have to play deck all the time. I can actually talk to people. He's right.
You weren't taught that. You weren't taught that until that
Nobody.
moment.
That's right.
That's right.
Tony taught me that.
Yeah. That's right, Shaun.
but everybody's like, I mean, I was around construction workers my whole life because my dad was one. So like, I wasn't completely green, but I still remember walking around the first job, the guy, first floor iron worker, erect, and he's standing up on the beam and he's screaming at me. I just walked out. I didn't even have an interaction with him. And he was like, we don't need anybody fucking bird dogging us. Right? I'm like,
there you go.
Okay, good morning. You know what I mean? Good day. Like, and then him and I became great friends by the end of the job because he yelled at me for about a week. And then he's like, okay, actually, this guy's probably not a bad guy. And then we became friends. And I think letting those younger people know the little thing, going back to like being in the trenches. I remember my first job, like the general super on the job he was meant to be in the office. He would roll in like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I would be at the coffee truck with everybody at 5. And they would do more for me than him just because he would roll in at that time.
Right. Respect.
Because you're outside in the rain with them.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I'm out there measuring rebar cages, and they see me out there and he's rolling in with his, and he just is dressed a lot nicer, and it goes goes a long way. But yeah, some of it is you need to take that beating, unfortunately. But
Well, you do, and it's a two-way street, right? So if you're going to take that beating, you're getting that fresh person out of Keene. They should have some.
Why can't it be a mass memory? Throw a mass
It could
memory.
be mass maritime. That's fine. They're all right.
but it's Wentworth too, right? It's a green person, but to Doug's point and to everybody's point, like it's a lot to throw on the safety persons.
Well, it's a lot for, like you gave the assistant superintendent example, and it's valid. I think safety oftentimes does stand by themselves, and they don't really have a lot of resources around them on the job if they are there. So it's on us to make sure that they are supported, right? I mean that's really important. Just team them up with a good superintendent that's going to care and take them under their wing, or spend that time every day at 12:30 like you do, Bob, and make sure that they have an opportunity to ask those questions and get some mentorship. But if you throw them out there on an island and say good luck, sink or swim, forget about it. And the other side of it is true too. Like the two ironworker examples both of you gave, I mean, that still exists today. But that's one of those things that I would personally like to see maybe, thin out over time, because there's more of collaboration between one another. Go ahead and yell at one another. That's fine, in good spirit, but at least respect one another that, you just walked out of the trailer. You're not there bird dogging. Yeah. You're out there to take a measurement.
Yeah.
And as a safety guy, don't scream at an ironworker that's been doing it for 30 years. Like that's wrong too, right? So somewhere in the middle is how it should be. And you're not going to get it every day, but ultimately, wouldn't it be a better environment to be in if there was a little bit more of respect? And I think that is something we can get out of this, showing people, because I don't think people realize what safety has to deal with on a daily basis. And certainly we don't always, myself, I haven't been in the trades. I've not walked a mile in an ironworker's boots, so I don't really know exactly what they have to do. I can make some assumptions, but I don't know exactly. So it'd be cool to hear from them.
Yeah. No, it's funny, but the one thing, this is a little bit related, but the culture is changing in construction in so many ways for the better. And I swear I might get crap for saying this, but I really believe it, that the increase in women participation on construction sites in the trades is single-handedly changing the culture for the better. When you talk about that scenario, with people yelling at each other and just acting like complete savages and a-holes all day, just back and forth, it doesn't happen as much as it used to 10 years ago. And I really do credit the increase in female participation on construction sites. We act a little bit more like gentlemen now than we used to, and I absolutely love that.
I'll give you an example of what you just said. I was on a job a month ago, and I was walking from room to room looking at sliding doors on the exterior. Balconies were not in yet, or balcony guardrails were not in yet, so I just wanted to make sure that our blocking was in place so someone wouldn't open that door by accident. And as I was walking down the hall, I was listening to a woman speaking to a coworker, a male coworker. She was up on a ladder, and she was talking about, you guys just need to talk more. The suicide rate in construction, especially men, is the highest in any industry. And it just put a smile on my face. I ended up following up with her several weeks later, and her journey into the industry is really interesting, and I'd love to learn more about it. She actually graduated from college with a psychology degree and somehow found her way into the industry. And to your point, I really credit that woman for being in the industry, for having that conversation with that coworker. That never would have happened without her being in the industry.
Yeah.
100% agree with that. I'd love to learn more about that sort of non-traditional journey into construction. Maybe they have an educational background or skill set that supports, having a diverse conversation at the point of work, if you will, right?
Yeah. So many people in this industry to choose from for guests on a podcast.
Yeah, no, it's
just start thinking about the people that you know in this industry and who would make a great guest for a podcast. Interesting stories, just some in the trade, some from the client side, some from the design team side. I mean, just like true experts at what they do with very unique perspectives.
Yeah, I think it's a net positive if we move in that direction, like you're talking about, where we're just going to be more professional. Half of me, though, not the getting in fights and throwing things and all this kind of stuff and insulting people, but a lot of people like being in this industry because it's not an office, right? Like I remember talking to my wife when I first started, and I said, if you saw what went on during my day, like if this was any other workplace, if you were in an accountant's office and someone just hauled off, like the amount of people I saw just throwing their hard hats places because they were mad. One company that you used to work for, Doug.
Yeah, no, I know.
Out there and chucks his fucking hard hat, across the floor. And I'm like, they would call the police and have the person removed from their office, and they would never be back. But it was just like, oh yeah, he's just having a bad day. I'm like, he's throwing things and swearing at some person. You know what I mean? Like, it's a hard thing. Like, there's a lot I love about that, but yeah, I think if we can get to a place where it can still be a fun atmosphere, because we don't want to. The reason we do this is because we don't want to be in a cube all day. And I don't know how we find that path.
It's so dynamic. I don't think just inherently because it's construction and the environment changes every minute. I mean, when you think about what you're building things and you come back 10 minutes later, it's different than when you left it 10 minutes ago. So inherently, you're going to have that uncontrolled environment, we'll call it, and that's what makes actually what we do so difficult from a risk standpoint. It's not. You're not talking about a general industry facility where you have a machine, you know what the machine does. There's a sensor on the machine where you can't put your hand underneath it and it's not going to come down your hand. You don't have that in construction.
Yeah.
So that inherently you have a little bit of that wild, wild west mentality still because of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. There's always going to be risk in what we do, and it's going to be dynamic, and it's going to be fun, and you're not going to be behind a desk. And the best thing I love about what we do is you can sit behind a desk for a few minutes, get feedback from others, create a plan, devise a policy, whatever you want to call it, create a process, and then you can go out and educate and train and see if it comes to fruition in the field. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. And now, if you do it blindly where you're just forcing it down people's throats, probably not the best way to do it, right? Because you want feedback, you want to make sure it's working, like you said. You want to make sure you get feedback of the folks out there that it makes sense, that they're bought in, they've had a chance to kind of vet it out, pilot it, if you will, or have feedback on that. And I think that's the best of both worlds right there. It's getting their buy-in, that it works, getting their feedback, making them part of the plan, and then they're more apt to have buy-in to the plan.
What would you say about a guest that can help us simplify safety? There are companies out there, there are training programs out there that talk about energy sources as a way to identify hazards, for example. There's definitions of serious injury fatalities that may help people programmatically go after things that matter more than a hand laceration. What do you think about finding someone to speak about simplifying safety to the extent that's possible?
Well, and you bring up a good point, and I thought about this a little differently. When you were going to ask us, who would you have on as a guest? That's thinking of the premise that we're each going to do a podcast for X amount of minutes on a topic, right?
Yeah, that's why I said guest or topic.
Yep, or topic.
Yeah.
My philosophy went to, all right, what if we had a topic and each of us worked off of that topic and we all had a little bit more work that way, but maybe less work overall. You have different levels of participation, tradesperson, crew lead, technology, could be leadership on that topic, maybe some responsibility, what they think it is, and it's more of a 10-minute clip from each of us as opposed to a 40-minute one clip of us, going into it. It
could almost be like a little series. So if you stuck to simplifying safety, and then each of you did 5 or 10 minutes on it, and then it's a little series of 4 on simplifying safety.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
idea.
Not to harp on it, but
you're going
person one level down. I'm really interested in, because some of them might be new and all the stuff we were just talking about, but what do they think? And I'm sure you guys have been through it. The industry has changed where safety gets 1,000 times more respect than it did when I started. But I'm sure there's still some, predetermined thoughts about the safety profession. And what is that like going out somewhere? And maybe it's not as much as it used to be. There still's got to be job sites where, okay, this person is an impediment to me. Because what's that like? How do you I would want to hear from a person, how do you get over that challenge where you're going out and, okay, this is just an albatross around my neck that's just going to slow us down and doesn't know what they're talking about, trying to build a building, and this person's going to slow me down. I have to imagine that still exists on some job sites. And I would like to hear from someone who's kind of boots on the ground now,
yeah,
what's that like? I wouldn't want to be in that position. That's going to feel kind of shitty, to be frank, at times, right?
I don't know. I mean, I like the idea. I guess I really like what Shaun said at the onset, and that is it's a great industry. So are we showcasing the wrong side of the conversation? If we have the conversation about how do you handle that disagreement or that team that's setting you aside and not including you? I just...
Well, I think of, like, I've got an intern emailed me this morning, right? Rising, or is a junior now. And he worked for us this summer and on a large job with 300 some odd trades every day, in and around that number. By the end of the summer, he was with a lead safety manager on site. By the end of the summer, the lead safety manager said, during the all hands meeting, 300 some odd trades in front of him, "Oh no, this is your time." He said, "What?" "No, yeah, you're going to run this meeting." What? Now, he emailed me this morning. He wants to come back. So that's great. So it would be interesting to hear from him, I think, in a way like, hey, what was that experience like on this large job?
Yeah. And I don't mean only talking about that. Like, if their perspective is that, oh, this is amazing. Like, my favorite people are the ironworkers. Even like, that's how I felt when the job was over. Right? I loved the ironworkers. Like, I thought they were great. They were the ones that started off screaming at me. So, but just a real perspective from them, right? Where
so you're confronted with a challenge. How did you overcome that challenge?
Oh yeah. What is it like? What is it? I wish they taught me more at Keene State. Like I never realized how much I love working outside. Like I want to hear it all, not just the negative, but just the reality, and not blow by the fact that you're put in a pretty challenging position, and a lot is expected out of you. What's that like when you're 24? Yeah,
well, that was on my list of, in addition to everything you guys already mentioned, the safety person of all different levels, because I do think it's interesting. And I know, Jason, you're big on the trades and you want to hear from them. And I love that. I think that's great. It's compelling. It's going to be exciting too, to hear kind of the day in life. I think of the same for safety people. I do think it's a little unique. I think there's more known about it now. You could say more respected. I don't know, but it's more understood that safety is here for a purpose. And I think it's evolved over time from code compliance to more of a caring, nature, not just with us, but also the people coming out of school. I think it's quick to realize I have to take a different approach here. So I think it would be cool to hear from that and have other people hear. Safety people have feelings.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Because also it might...
Maybe not you, Jason.
I have feelings. I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah, I mean, it might mean that someone's listening and now has a new respect for a safety person. Maybe I hadn't thought about that. Or
appreciation, understanding, something. Respect might go a little far, but yeah, just an understanding that, because at the end of the day, like you said, safety isn't on a pedestal. Safety shouldn't be on a pedestal. It shouldn't be safety first, right? I agree with you there, Jason. Like it's woven into the product itself, into what we're trying to achieve, right? It just has to be part of that. If it becomes part of that, integral part of that, then we're going to have success. So yeah,
I'd love to see some data. Like, maybe this is in Doug's wheelhouse, or maybe even like, because you guys are so big, you probably have both of you guys have big firms that probably have a lot of data collected to show some metrics around safety and productivity, or safety and cost. I think that's something I would be interested in, because a lot of people will say that, like a safer job is a more profitable job, we were talking about earlier, right? Or more whatever job. Like, are there numbers?
I don't know the answer to that.
I wouldn't have numbers, but we know a shit job when we see one. And the shit jobs always tank, and they have the most incidents on site, the most non-compliant issues that we see, probably losers in cost, probably losers by schedule, probably burn a bridge with a client. We know what they look like, and they're always the same. And the opposite is always true. The clean jobs, the safe jobs, fewer incidents, happier client, happier trade partners, done on time, under budget.
I don't know if there's data on it, but I can see. I see that. I see what you're saying.
But I mean, I would like the perspective from you four of, okay, if we have an accident on our job, what does that mean to our insurance? What do we eat as a GC? What goes to builder's risk insurance? Like, there's got to be some real numbers behind this, that at least, even if it's not a clear, profitability metric or something like that. But what are the hard numbers, and what are the real costs that change, and why does, what about a CSIP versus an OSIP, and like that would be, I think, interesting for people, because that's kind of this black box. You hear OSIP and CSIP, but what does that actually mean to the bottom line? And why would you want to even take on the insurance policy? You probably grabbed the person walking down the street and said, hey, if you're going to do this $1 billion job with all this risk in it, do you want the insurance, or would you rather somebody else have the insurance? I'd say, fuck, have somebody else have that. I have no interest in that. I think that's probably not the right answer, but or maybe it is. But I think just
depends on your program.
Well, right. And I think sometimes it gets looked at as a tool to be more competitive, right? If you can insure yourself and get a better rate than your competitor, it's going to save the client money just off the bat, right off the bat, to start the job.
Oh, well, and we'll do them, and it's also an opportunity to throw in some more preventative measures, right? Because now you have more control, more insight into the.
So you're starting the job off right off the bat with a more competitive rate than maybe your competitor, because you can provide insurance, you can provide a lower rate that's attractive to the client. And to your point, now you kind of manage, you have the risk on the site, and the insurance is under you. You can set up where we're going to go to get healthcare availability. Is there an on-site wellness program? What are some of the programs we're going to run that everyone has to buy into? So
yeah, just an education. Even the fact that most people don't understand what an EMR is. And the fact that, okay, what is industry average? What does that translate
to your point, Joe? Like
cost?
We run a lot of CSIP. We're starting to run a lot of OSIP now, and it's amazing to me when a trade partner has an event happen where there's maybe an injury on site, that they think, oh, it's on your insurance, it doesn't impact us, do whatever you want. And it's like, time out. No, that's not how it works. It impacts your EMR, and they don't realize that, and they're in the business. It's baffling to me. I'm like,
how long does an accident live on your EMR?
Yeah,
I don't know that. I would love to know that, and I think a lot of people in this business would like to know. One, they might not know what an EMR even is.
Yeah. Well, it's the current period, then 3 periods after that. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I don't know if anyone's interested in tackling that from a more like data centric way. Like, hey, here's the analysis that happens on an average company. It doesn't even have to be your company. You can just be like, hey, this is what goes into it. And what is the cost of a full-time safety person? When do you look at a job and say, is it owner driven, or is it, hey, no, when we look at it, when it gets to X millions of dollars, or no, millions of dollars doesn't matter because it could just be high-end finishes? How do you decide that it's a full-time safety or half-time safety, or Supra's running safety and we stop him once a month? I don't know how you decide that. I would like to know how you decide that. And I also think people would be very interested with how you do look at it, in the same way that when we met a few weeks back, the episodes that do the best are always the industry people talking how they do their thing. PM's talking about how they PM, the scheduler talking about how they schedule, because everybody who is that wants to hear, well, how does that other person do it? I do it this way, but how do they do it? Because they want to be better and they want to learn. So I think hearing that approach would, myself personally, I would be the first one listening, right? Yeah. And I don't think, I would venture to say that's something where the majority of the industry doesn't know. Any other topics or guests that you guys think?
Oh, there's so many just in the Boston area. You think about some of the characters that not characters necessarily, but you think about like a Tim Irving or a Dan McNulty from the building trades.
Yes.
And their recovery assistance programs. Just so many people who have an unbelievable message to share, just in Boston alone. I know Tim Irving's back then. Tim, we're calling you out. We want you to come up for a podcast.
Excellent.
I know he's not in DC, but start thinking about the people in this industry, and you could probably name 15 off the top of your head right now that would make a great message, just a great person to talk to.
Yeah, Tim's a staple. He was my first safety guy when I got out of the business. Yeah. But
I keep going back to like Pat McDermott and Jamie Evans and the class that they taught at Harvard. One section.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard in this business, and having those two come in and do something like that. I mean, two great. It's a tough story, but they're storytellers, and they tell it very, very well.
Excellent.
Start throwing names out there.
Okay. One other one I'll throw, if I'm being selfish, is I think safety is pre-con, or safety is part of pre-con. I would be
absolutely
interested in that. as a topic? Like, what are the thoughts? Like, there's the obvious stuff, like, okay, critical picks and things like that. But what are the other things where you're identifying early the problems, whether it's from a straight safety issue or costs issue associated? Like, how does that happen in pre-con? What's that look like? How much do you get involved? Is it scheduled?
Yeah.
Is it just a cost thing? Is it just deciding how much it gets staffed? Do you look at who the super is, and does that inform? People would eat that up. So
I think that's really where there's really an opportunity for any firm to be better. And I think, Doug, you talked about certainty, and two things you were talking about that really kind of drives your certainty and productivity. I forget now what you said earlier.
Predictable,
yeah. I think the opportunity really is to get more involved on the pre-con side and to try to identify that hidden risk or opportunity, even on the owner's side, for prevention by design aspect, right? Which was the course that you were talking about, Jason. But I think that's really the opportunity, is we can spend more time on the pre-con side to set work up for success, so that the operations team just already has a template on how that activity should go. Because the reality is there are supers out there that they're out 3 months in advance with their plans. So when you walk up on a job and you're just pointing out something now to one of those supers, it's always going to be a bad outcome, right? Where were you 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Right? There's some folks out there that can visualize the work before it's in place, without a model even. And I think the pre-con side allows you to kind of work with them early on.
It's a good topic.
Yeah.
The pre-construction side.
Yeah, I like that.
Probably a series, to be honest with you.
Yeah. How do you buy out certain contracts? Just contractual items to safeguard. Yeah. There's a whole subset of that you could probably get into.
Yeah,
I like the idea of the mini-series, by the way.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned beyond pre-con, you're talking, pull planning throughout the life of a job as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you come up to a super and you say at the day of, right? And it's totally true. Where the hell were you 3 weeks ago? This is on the schedule.
Yeah.
You show up today? Right. Come on. Yeah. So that would be interesting. Lean, principles too. I mean, somebody, lean expert. The great communicators are fantastic. The daily huddles and everything. I mean, they, with driving results. It'd be a good topic. And you had mentioned also, mental health and substance use disorder. And, I think, if it were to be only that, it would be only that. So mixing that in sporadically, very important that it's top of mind. But I like a variety of topics. I think that would be the way to go. A variety of different topics and, different speakers and whatnot, guests.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And then I would also throw out maybe even just little micro topics, whether it's emergency response, site logistics. Like I talk about hot work a lot, and it's funny. I'll sit in a room and I'll do training on hot work, and I say, okay, what does the fire watch do if there's a fire? I get a lot of different answers. Somebody's like, oh, call 911. Someone else is like, pull station, put it out, blow an air horn. And, so you're in the room, and I'm like, okay, so this is everybody that is a supervision on the job, that are the professionals running this job. You people can't answer, but the person who's probably the lowest person on the totem pole with the least amount of experience, you're expecting them what to know in an emergency, right? And get to like rapid means of communication. Who do they call? How do they call? Are they using a two-way radio? Are they calling 911? Do they have a phone on them? Are they in a building? How many of us have worked in a building where you have no cell reception? Yeah. Okay, you have no cell reception in an emergency, call 911. Okay, well, that's great. So, I mean, like just taking, and that could be a 5-minute, like how do you do some task well, right? And where do you see as safety professionals, hey, what we always end up doing wrong is this. So let's talk about that. So I'd love to hear like your perspectives about, even if it's just little pockets like that, like just hot work or just fall protection or site work.
Well, it's interesting you say that, but there's one task that I don't know what your experiences are, but there's one task that we get right 100% of the time, and that's incident response.
Yeah, that's true.
Call the super, go to the gate, wait for the ambulance. right? There's more to it, but there's 5 defined steps. How is it that we can have that look like poetry in motion and normal work has this variation to it?
Yep.
So I like what you're saying there. If we could just take some really important aspect of the fire watch.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing.
You think that's 100% of the time is accurate?
It's been my experience, yes.
From a leadership perspective, maybe. Site leadership perspective.
No, well, we do after actions on responses, and it's certainty that those steps are going to be followed.
Interesting. So we define it at any large gathering. We define those steps because people inevitably will forget because they're in the moment.
Well, I'll say we train on it. We train on it though, as on the onboarding and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the super knows to go to the gate, meet EMS, and tell them what door they're on, and the operator might know that. But after that, the fire watch, maybe not, right?
May not be.
And then what's the address? So you call 911. What's the address? Well, it's a new building. There is no
That's right.
On your RDAT sticker.
yeah.
If you have one. Yeah. Well, I think there's an opportunity for to build in if we so choose, but some lessons learned. It's a great media for it, right? If there's we had some recently that we all shared over the last 6 months, I'd say, unusual events happening in and around Boston on our jobs. That would be neat to share. Get a wider audience hearing it.
Okay.
I did take one note for a podcast. The story of how you went from gym teacher to safety professional. That's one of the only notes I took here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
that's
Had
gotta
something
be-
to do with anatomy and physiology. Just couldn't understand why I needed to know that. Be a gym teacher.
Series of life decisions.
Well, you're still a teacher.
Coming here with you today.
You're a teacher,
right? It's really weird.
Love it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And a coach.
Well-being teacher, right? That fits in perfectly.
I've actually never heard somebody say that. I'm going to be a gym teacher. Go to school to be a gym teacher.
It's the first
First person ever.
I would love to be a gym
Keene
teacher.
was huge at the time.
Teaching-
Doug was there.
teaching school.
It was number one teaching school. Now it's safety.
Yeah.
They have a gym teacher program?
They have teaching, but you go into... Yeah, we're
It
different.
was just so specific, Shaun.
Do you always want to be a seaman? I mean...
Oh, look at we're devolving. Yes.
Oh, now we're devolving.
Yeah. He's accusing people of devolving. That's really
No class to
Yeah. But all right.
Sailor.
Well,
I prefer the term sailor.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Stand corrected.
if there's no other topics that are jumping out, I think we can probably wrap it. And for people that are listening, if there are topics that you as a listener would want to hear more, please reach out. We'll get some social platforms around this podcast moving forward. But in the interim, you can find us by name on LinkedIn or whatever and shoot folks a message, or find me at Mass Construction, shoot me a message, and we'll make it happen. But
Yeah, for the 4 listeners that are listening to this, to 4 safety professionals and a Joe Kelly talk. If you guys have ideas, go ahead and shoot them back at us. Actually, we'll probably get a lot of good feedback on ideas for shows from.
about what you're doing wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks to all you guys for coming down. I appreciate you taking the time. I think this is
Putting it together.
Appreciate the opportunity.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me as well. I think this is a good opportunity here, and I think this could be great for all the industry. So I'm excited.